people are very slow, especially very slow in spiritual life. So Lord Chaitanya made the process as easy as possible, basically chanting, dancing. One evening, Allen Ginsberg brought Ed Sanders and Tuli Kupferberg of the Fugs, F-U-G-S, to the meeting. The Fugs, a local group that had made a name for themselves, specialized in obscene lyrics. Among the popular songs of the Fugs were Slum Goddess of the Lower East Side, and a couple others. I Can't Get High. Ed had wild red hair and an electric red beard, and he played a guitar during the kirtan. The devotees were happy to see their prestigious guests. That's Kali Yuga, super low class, just gross group of musicians were prestigious guests. they were a little bit well known in the world of popular music, not very much, but a little bit. So for the Lower East Side, they were celebrities or prestigious guests. That's Kali Yuga. Anyone, just if someone has a lot of money or a position of power, is considered a gentleman, or a girl that becomes a rock star. The rock stars have the lowest of habits, but if they get famous and they have a lot of money, people will consider them ladies. They call them this gentleman or this lady, and that's Kali Yuga. You don't have to do much to be a gentleman or lady in Kali Yuga. You just have to have some money or some musical talent or athletic talent. Then people respect you very much. And the sannyasi and the saintly person is not very much appreciated in Kali Yuga. Let's see. So anyway, all the devotees knew what the Fugs stood for and what they were known for. I don't know if they told Prabhupada, I don't know if they told Swamiji, but the night of the Fugs, however, Prabhupada chose to speak on the illusion of sexual pleasure. Very appropriate. But for everyone in the material world. But they were like the epitome of that so-called freedom. Sex pleasure binds us to this material world, birth after birth, he said. And he quoted, as he often did, a verse of Yamunacharya. Since I have become Krishna conscious, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. The Fugs never returned. That's it. To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans. Let's see. What about sex? Asked the ISKCON attorney, Steve Goldsmith, one evening. He was a lawyer that was coming, and he liked the devotees, he liked Prabhupada, and he was coming, he helped them with some legal matters. One evening, he asked, what about sex one evening, speaking out from the rear of the crowded temple. Sex should only be with one's wife, Prabhupada said, and that is also restricted. Sex is for the propagation of Krishna-conscious children. My spiritual master used to say that to beget Krishna-conscious children, he was prepared to have sex 100 times. Of course, that is most difficult in this age. Therefore, he remained a brahmachari. But sex is a very strong force, Mr. Goldsmith challenged. What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Prabhupada. Therefore, in every culture, there is the institution of marriage, Prabhupada replied. You can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman, but the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children. So that's it's like Prabhupada gave the example of if you want to drive a car, you can't just get in the car and just start driving. You have to get a driver's license, and you learn the rules of the road for driving. So, and if you do something wrong, you can get a ticket or get arrested because you broke the rules. So a license for driving doesn't mean, oh, I got a license, I can drive anywhere I want now. But a license comes with restrictions. And so sex, marriage in Krishna consciousness is a license for some sense gratification, limited sense gratification. But the restrictions are included in the license. Let's see. Hayagriva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left, beside the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly, only once a month. And with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, better to forget the whole thing. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's it. Very good boy. Swamiji laughed, and others joined him. It is best not to think about it. Best to just chant Hare Krishna. And he held up his hands as if he were chanting on a strand of beads. That way, we will be saved from so much botheration. Sex is like the itching sensation, that's all. And as when we scratch, it gets worse, so we should tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage. Right. At this point, I often quote a line from one very, very popular musician from the 60s and later. His name was Leonard Cohen. And in one of his songs, he was very philosophical, pretty deep by music standards, by general standards. Anyway, one of the lines in one of his songs was you are locked into your suffering, and your pleasures are the seal. It's a very, very Krishna conscious line. And of course, he didn't live by that, but he at least had the idea and some realization.
Pleasures are seals.
What?
Seals. Pleasures are the seal. Oh.
The lock.
Okay.
You are locked into your suffering, and your pleasures are the seal. It's a pretty good realization. But Steve Goldsmith, the lawyer, was shaking his head. Prabhupada looked at him, smiling. There's still a problem? It's just that, well, it's been proved dangerous to repress the sex drive. There's a theory that we have wars because, and Prabhupada interrupted, we have wars because people are eating meat. As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if man eats meat, he will be sure to have illicit sex also. Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON, but Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. The way they have all these theories and justifications and for all kinds of sense gratification, including sex desires. It's not good to repress desire for sense gratification. It's unhealthy. It'll make you sick and give you all kinds of psychoses and neuroses and everything. There's so many people who believe that. Of course, at this time, a lot of the people that Prabhupada was preaching to were vegetarians, but just because they were hippies or vegetarians, they weren't giving up sex. I don't think any of them ever considered that. But they could understand something about the violence of meat eating, which is pretty easy to understand. The overall sense gratification point is a little more difficult. But that's also easy to understand if you hear it from the proper source. Anyways, one thing it said at the beginning was of this was that the meetings at 26 Second Avenue became very popular, and there was many people coming. And it said Brahmananda Prabhu used to stand by the door, and I'm pretty sure that he was probably standing there to keep an eye on whoever was coming in, because he's like that. He's very official and watchful and protective. And that devotee who was here, Tredas, who was the president here in the early 70s, one thing I remember about him is that he didn't stand down there by the door. He would stand up here in kirtan, but he was always very watchful about whoever was coming in. That's his nature, and he was like that too. So it's always good to have some devotees who are like that. They're very careful and protective of all the devotees and deities, because definitely over the years in Boston and so many temples around the world, probably in India too, but crazy people come in, and sometimes you never know what they're going to do. You have to. The temple is Vaikuntha, but we're right in the middle of Boston or Delhi or New York, and there's crazy people everywhere. And so you have to be. You need Kshatriyas. You need people who are on guard. Okay, so this is the next section. Judson Hall on West 57th Street cost $200 to rent for one night. Roy Ram thought it was time Swamiji tried reaching some of the more sophisticated New Yorkers. And since Judson Hall was near Carnegie Hall, very famous music and performance auditorium in New York City, probably one of the most famous places. And it was near Carnegie Hall, had sometimes had interesting concerts and lectures. He thought it would be a good place to start. Swamiji agreed to the idea, and Roy Ram printed an announcement which he distributed in the Midtown bookstores. And very early, ISKCON in '66, Roy Ram was very prominent among the devotees. And he was very intellectual, very philosophically astute, and able to argue with any of the Lower East Side people who came and had some argument. He was very expert in, but after not very long, a year or 2 years, he had an argument with Prabhupada. He was one of the ones in charge of putting out the Back to Godhead, and he had an argument with Prabhupada about how it should be done. And Prabhupada wouldn't give him into him, so he left. It was very unfortunate. He knew the philosophy very well, but he didn't really pick up on that pretty crucial point. Don't argue with your spiritual master, and don't leave him if he disagrees with you. Let's see. On the night of the event, the devotees paraded through the Midtown entertainment areas, beating a bass drum and handing out leaflets. Bass drum is one of these that you carry and you hit it with a mallet. It's pretty loud. They were beating a bass drum and going around chanting and beating a bass drum and handing out leaflets. Then they returned to Judson Hall for the program. Only 7 people attended. The devotees felt terrible. They had misled Swamiji and spent the equivalent of a month's rent. There was one program like that here in Boston at Boston University. They had a big auditorium there, and only a few people came. And you can imagine how the devotees felt. They're feeling pretty bad. The devotees felt terrible. They said, "We can cancel the program if you like, Swamiji," Roy Ram said. But Prabhupada replied, "No, let us chant and speak." So the devotees took the stage and chanted with Swamiji and danced and then sat beside him as he lectured, his voice echoing through the empty hall. Afterwards, Swamiji called for questions, and a young man about 15 vacant rows back asked whether he was correct in understanding that the Swami's philosophy was primarily for reforming destitute young people. Destitute means helpless, poor, like homeless. "No," Prabhupada replied, "everyone in this material world is lost and destitute, even the so-called successful person, because everyone has forgotten Krishna. There's no one as a success in the material world. Doesn't matter how rich or powerful, famous a person is, everyone is lost and destitute." After the program, Swamiji sat in a chair by the exit as the few members of the audience were leaving. A respectable-looking couple introduced themselves, and Swamiji sat up very straight with folded palms and smiled. Brahmananda's mother was present, and Swamiji was very cordial toward her. But in general, the devotees were depressed at the small turnout. "I'm sorry, Swamiji, we invited you here and almost no one came." Roy Ram apologized, but Prabhupada raised his eyebrows and said, "No one? You did not see Narada Muni? You did not see Lord Brahma? When there is chanting of Hare Krishna, even the demigods come to participate." You might say, "Oh, that's an exaggeration," or "Come on, you can't really believe that," or as a faithless person would say. But Prabhupada said it, and we assume that he saw Narada Muni and Lord Brahma and the demigods. And Prabhupada did say that when you go out on Harinam Sankirtan, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are out, they're dancing with you and chanting. We're never alone, and definitely not alone when we go out to preach. Back at the temple, Prabhupada chided Roy Ram. I told you we should have charged money. When something is free, people think it is worthless, but just charge $3 or $5 and people will think, oh, you're offering some very valuable thing. In Bengal, there is a story of a man who went house to house offering free mangoes. And no one would take his mangoes because everyone thought, oh, why is he giving away these mangoes? There must be something wrong with them. So he charged 3 rupees, and then they thought, well, these look like good mangoes. The price is only 3 rupees. All right. So when people see that something is free, they think it is worthless. Charge them some money, and they will think it is very nice. Anyway, in general, Krishna consciousness is, from the beginning, was presented as very free. Anyone could come to 26 Second Avenue. Anyone can come to the temple and have prasadam. And but we encourage them to give donations also in taking prasadam or taking books. But when you go out to preach, Prabhupada wanted the devotees to ask for a donation for his books because of this principle that if it's free, they might think it's worthless, as Prabhupada said. So we should try to get donations, but oftentimes we give away books, I give away books, oftentimes without taking donations. Anyway, the whole process of Krishna consciousness, Lord Chaitanya's whole mission and everything that we do is giving. Lord Chaitanya came to distribute pure love of Krishna without any charge, the marketplace of the holy name. And he said that the price of the Hare Krishna mantra, Maha Mantra, is only your faith. What's the verse that says that? Yeah, so the whole process of Krishna consciousness is just giving prasadam, giving books, giving the holy name, giving darshan of the deities. It's all just giving. We're not in the temple to make money, but we do need Lakshmi. We do ask for donations, but that's not the basic principle. And generally people are very willing to give some donation. It's not generally people want to give something, but if they don't, we still want to give them Krishna consciousness. One basic principle in preaching is you distribute Krishna consciousness to everyone. Lord Chaitanya distributed freely to everyone, not considering who is a fit candidate and who is not. We don't go out and say, oh, that guy looks intelligent, or that guy looks like he might be able to understand. That guy looks like he's just a bum. He probably can't hardly even think or know anything. I'm not going to bother with him. Or that guy looks too rich. He's probably too puffed up, so I won't go to him. But this guy looks okay, so I'll go. And to some extent, there's some discrimination that goes on. I mean, inevitably. But the basic principle is Lord Chaitanya distributed pure love of Krishna to anyone, not considering who's a fit candidate and who is not. And the whole process of Krishna consciousness is giving. And when we give to people, then people almost invariably want to give something to you, give something to Krishna. Let's see. Okay, this is Burton Green, was a musician fond of the Swami and fond of banging on the innards of the piano in the temple during kirtan. This is him speaking. We had a really explosive thing to break out of with this capitalistic, materialistic egg sitting on us. So there was so much ferocity in the music to break out of, and rock and roll music is like that. It's just, he calls it ferocious. But it's all just very heavy sense gratification music. Even if it's quiet, it's still, in that sense, ferocious. But spinning out like that, you could have a nervous breakdown. So it was, especially if you're doing it while taking drugs, you could have a nervous breakdown. It's also not uncommon. So it was great to go to the Swami's and chant in his small storefront on 2nd Avenue. The streets were full of Maya and perversion, and his was a place to really mellow out, as they say now, to chill. It was great to chant there, to balance my life. It was great to sit and have prasadam with the Swami and get some real authentic Indian cooking and chapatis and talk about things, especially when I had very little money in my pocket. It was always nice to go. Let's read a little bit more. When Burton asked Prabhupada to attend, this is pretty crazy. When Burton asked Prabhupada to attend his piano recital at Town Hall Theater, Prabhupada agreed. And this is Brahmananda Prabhu speaking. About 7 or 8 of us in our sneakers and jeans had ridden on the subway with Swamiji to Town Hall. We went in and took our seats and the concert began. Burton Green came out, opened the piano top, took a hammer and began wildly hitting on the strings inside the piano. The strings are those wire chords that the hammers of the piano hit, and they make a note, a nice musical note. But if you open it up and bang on them directly with a metal hammer, it's just a crazy racket. It's just a crazy thing. He began, so that's his idea of a concert. Took a hammer and began wildly hitting on the strings inside the piano. And it went on for an hour and a half. We were all sitting there with Swamiji, and we all began chanting on our beads. There were only about 24 people in the whole theater. So more people will come to hear somebody bang on a piano with a hammer than will come to listen to a lecture about going back home, back to God. They had 24 people there for this. Then the intermission came and Swamiji wanted to go to the toilet room, and I went along and helped him, turning on the water in the sink, getting a paper towel for him. Doing these little services for Swamiji seemed like the perfection of my life. And that's something that all Prabhupada's servants and anyone who did anything for him, they'll say something like that. Just getting Prabhupada a tissue or wipe his hands or any little thing, getting him a cup of water, seemed like the perfection of my life. And it is the perfection of your life. There was something so great about him that just doing those things was my perfection. And I felt like I was protecting him, like I was his personal bodyguard. Coming up on the subway, I had shown him how the subway worked and answered his questions. It all seemed very intimate. Anyway, we went back upstairs to our seats after an hour and a half and an intermission. And Burton Green came right up to Swamiji saying, "Swamiji, are you happy? Are you comfortable? Do you like it?" And Swamiji was very polite and said yes. Then Burton said, "Now the second part is coming." I interrupted him and tried to say that Swamiji is very tired and he takes rest at 10. It was already after 10, so I said we had to go back. But he pressed Swamiji to stay for the second half, and so we had to stay. Prabhupada would have left when Brahmananda very diplomatically said we should leave. But Burton Green said, come on, please, stay. And Prabhupada said, all right, we'll stay. Then the poets came out and recited poetry. And poetry wasn't like Shakespeare or some famous poet. Poetry was like wild, crazy, erratic stuff that most people would not call. But it was hippie times, and it was hippie poetry and hippie music. We were there until about 11:30, and then we had to ride back on the subway. But a few weeks later, I learned that Prabhupada had another reason for going to town hall. He was thinking of renting it for a temple, and he wanted to see it. That's just a little thing. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there now. Anyone have anything, questions or comments?
That was a musical performance by that fellow, Burton.
Yeah. And they had a piano like that at 26 2nd Avenue, where it was open, and you just strummed on the wires inside. So Burton Green really liked that, because that's what he was into anyway. Yeah. And if you read the lilamrita again, you'll see there's a lot of things that you'll see that you didn't remember. Every time I read it, it's like, oh boy, I completely forgot about that. So many things.
I don't think I could have tolerated listening to that.
What?
I don't think I could have tolerated for that long listening to that kind of thing.
I mean, I would have left if I wasn't with Swamiji. I wouldn't have stayed. I'm sure none of the devotees would have stayed except they were with Prabhupada. Anyway, it's like that with all Prabhupada's books. All transcendental literature, or practically any literature, but definitely with Prabhupada's books, you read the same book you read a year ago or 10 years ago, and you'll see, boy, I didn't remember that, or I completely forgot that. I mean, it's one of the qualities. That's why Srila Vyasadeva had to write down the Vedas in the first place, because Kali Yuga, people, you can't remember anything. I know I can't. Okay, let's stop. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Das Goswami.
Started coming from this way.
Did he later became devotee? That piano person, did they become devotee later?
I don't know.